The war was at its worst. The Xarthan Empire, a highly advanced alien race, had devastated human colonies across the galaxy. Earth, once the proud home of humanity, had become nothing more than a forgotten myth. The cities, the bustling streets, the technology, all wiped out in a blink of an eye. There was no sign of life left on the planet. The Xarthans ruled with an iron grip, their massive fleets hovering above the ashes of humanity. For most, the idea of Earth ever coming back seemed impossible. Humanity's only hope rested in one man, General Elias Kane. He was a war hero, a legend from 300 years ago. Kane had been placed into Cryo sleep after the war against the Xarthans had reached its brutal conclusion. He was thought to be dead, lost in time, but his memory lived on in the stories told by the surviving few. Kane was humanity's last chance. His leadership, tactics, and sheer willpower had turned the tide during the war. And now, the Resistance had one goal: to awaken him. It wasn't a decision taken lightly. Cryosleep wasn't a simple process. It was dangerous, and the technology to revive someone from such a long period was rare. But the Resistance knew they had no other choice. The Xarthans were too powerful, their fleets too strong, and their grip on the galaxy too tight. If they didn't act fast, humanity would be lost forever. The scene was set. In a dark, cold facility, surrounded by machines and blinking lights, General Kane's Cryo chamber was activated. The chamber hummed to life, and the ancient technology began to pulse with energy. Slowly, the frozen capsule began to open. Inside, Kane's body was encased in thick, ice-cold armor that had preserved him for centuries. His eyes fluttered open, the sharp light of the facility cutting through the darkness of his long sleep. For a few moments, Kane's mind was disoriented. He felt as though he was trapped between dreams and reality, between life and death. His breath came in short gasps as the fog in his mind began to clear. He was alive, but he quickly realized something was wrong. There was no warmth of familiar faces, no sounds of life. Only silence. A few seconds passed, and he slowly sat up, his limbs stiff from the long sleep. As he stood, his gaze fell on the room around him. The cold metal walls, the wires, the glowing screens showing data he couldn't comprehend. This wasn't the world he remembered. The echoes of destruction rang in his ears, and he could feel the weight of time pressing down on him. A voice crackled through the speakers. "General Kane, do you hear me?" It was the voice of the Resistance leader, Commander Larkin. Kane recognized it instantly. "Larkin," he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What's going on? Where am I?" "You're back, General. We've awakened you. You're on Earth. Well, what's left of it?" Kane froze, the words sinking in like a cold wave. "Earth? But how?" He stumbled, trying to stand steady, his body still recovering from the shock of being thrust into a new era. "The Xarthans, have they conquered everything?" "Almost," Larkin replied. "The colonies are destroyed. The Resistance is fractured. And Earth is a wasteland. But we've been fighting in your name, General. We've kept the spirit of humanity alive. And we need you now, more than ever." Kane's mind raced. The Xarthans, the brutal war, the loss of everything he knew. He had expected the world to be different, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. His first instinct was to fight, to find a way to push back against the enemy. But as he looked around the empty, ruined facility, he realized something else. This wasn't the world he had once known, and the fight wouldn't be the same either. Larkin continued, her voice growing more urgent. "General, we need your tactics, your leadership. You're the only one who can end this war. We have no time to waste. The Xarthan Empire is growing stronger, and soon they'll have complete control." Kane clenched his fists. He could feel the familiar fire of battle rekindling inside him. This was what he had trained for, what he had fought for. But his mind, still groggy from the sleep, struggled to find clarity. He needed time to understand what had happened, to assess the situation. But time was something they didn't have. "Give me a moment," Kane muttered. He walked to a nearby console, his legs feeling stiff. As he navigated through the controls, holographic displays came to life around him, showing images of Earth's shattered cities, the scattered remnants of human resistance, and the massive Carthan fleet hovering in the skies above. He saw a map of the galaxy, with human colonies reduced to mere dots, insignificant compared to the vast, overwhelming presence of the Xarthan Empire. One image stood out above all. Earth, scared and broken, the once blue planet now darkened, almost unrecognizable. This was it. The war was lost, but not yet finished. A spark of hope flickered in his chest. The resistance had kept fighting. And now, they had him back. But Kane knew the odds were insurmountable. He wasn't foolish enough to think he could just charge in and take down the entire Carthan Empire by himself. He needed a plan. He needed to understand the new world he was thrust into. He needed time. But that's when the voice of Larkin cut through his thoughts again. "General, we have a plan. We've been working on it for months. But we need you to lead it. We got a shot. But we can't waste any more time. The Carthan fleet is closing in." Kane turned to face the screen. His eyes, now sharp with purpose, locked onto the information. He was being thrust into a war he didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. The Xarthans had underestimated humanity. They thought they had won, but they hadn't counted on Elias Kane. He would make them regret that mistake. Without another word, Kane stood tall, his mind already calculating the strategy. His body may have been frozen for centuries, but his mind was as sharp as ever. This was his fight. This was his war. And the Xarthans would soon learn that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how powerful they believed themselves to be, they were about to face humanity's greatest weapon, an unyielding spirit, and a general who had returned to turn the tide. As he strode out of the facility and into the wasteland that was once Earth, the weight of the task ahead settled on his shoulders. But he didn't flinch. He knew what had to be done. The fight was just beginning. General Elias Kane stood in the war room, surrounded by the leaders of the resistance. His mind, still sharp after centuries of slumber, was already working at full capacity, processing the information coming from every direction. The walls were lined with holographic maps, projections of Tarthan fleets, and tactical data that barely made sense to the human mind. The resistance had fought bravely, but they were outmatched. The enemy's technology was far superior, their weapons more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But General Kane wasn't just any soldier. He had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. The world he had known might be long gone, but his ability to think strategically hadn't faded. In fact, it had only sharpened with time. He wasn't about to rely on old tactics from a past era. If humanity was going to stand a chance, he would have to rethink everything. The resistance leaders watched as Kane studied the holograms, his gaze unwavering. They had been waiting for his guidance for so long, and now that he was awake, the pressure was on. They knew the Xarthans controlled the galaxy's most advanced technology, but they were still hoping that Kane's genius could find a way to turn the tables. Commander Larkin stepped forward, her voice steady, but filled with hope. "General, we need your plan. We've tried everything, but the Xarthans are everywhere. Their fleets are massive. Their warships are nearly invulnerable. Their gravitic core powers all their weapons, making them nearly unstoppable." Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said quietly. "I've been briefed on the situation. But there's one thing the Xarthans don't understand. They've relied so heavily on their technology that they've forgotten something crucial. They've forgotten that the human mind is their greatest threat." Larkin raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The Xarthans may have superior technology, but they lack creativity. They're predictable. They've built their empire on the idea that their advanced weapons and AI will give them complete control. But they've made one mistake. They've overlooked the possibility of a human mind working outside the box, and that's where we come in. Kane's voice was calm, but filled with an undeniable authority. The room fell silent as the resistance leaders listened closely. They had placed their faith in him, and he wasn't about to disappoint them. "We don't need to fight them head-on with brute force," Kane continued. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most. Their power comes from the gravitic core. It's the heart of their entire fleet, the source of their ability to control their warships and space stations. If we destroy that, we cripple their entire system. Without the gravitic core, they won't be able to control their ships, and they'll be vulnerable." Larkin's eyes widened. "But how do we even get close to it? It's heavily guarded. Their fleet is too strong." Kane smiled, a knowing look on his face. "That's where the real strategy comes in. We can't just attack them head-on. They're too powerful. But we don't need to fight them in space. We need to find a way to infiltrate their most secure facility, their main base on the moon of Raxor. The gravitic core is located there, deep underground, heavily protected by advanced cloaking devices and artificial intelligence systems." The room was still. The leaders were absorbing every word. "Cloaking devices?" Larkin asked, her voice skeptical. "How do we even detect them?" Kane's eyes gleamed. "I'm aware of the Xarthan cloaking technology, but their systems are designed to hide their ships, not their ground installations. With our technology, we can use a counter-signal to disrupt their cloaking field temporarily. It will give us enough time to infiltrate their base, destroy the gravitic core, and cripple their entire war machine." There was a pause as everyone processed what Kane was suggesting. The plan was ambitious, risky, and incredibly dangerous. But Kane wasn't one to back down from impossible odds. His mind was already racing through the next steps, thinking of contingencies, finding ways to outsmart the enemy at every turn. "I'll need a team," Kane said, his voice firm. "We'll infiltrate their facility in small, covered teams. They won't expect us to attack them from the ground, and that's what will give us the advantage. But we need to be quick. Once we trigger the disruption signal, we'll have a small window of opportunity to strike." Larkin nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "What about their AI? We've heard reports that they're using robots and advanced artificial intelligence to defend their bases." Kane's smile grew. "Their AI might be advanced, but it's still predictable. We'll use our own countermeasures to confuse their systems. Once we get inside the facility, we'll disable their defense systems, allowing us to reach the gravitic core." He turned to a group of technicians standing by, waiting for instructions. "Get me the specs for our cloaking technology. We'll need everything we've got. If we're going to win this war, we need to outsmart them at every turn." The room erupted into action as the resistance leaders began coordinating the next steps. Kane stood at the center, his mind calculating every detail. The odds were still stacked against them, but for the first time in a long while, Kane felt the rush of purpose. The plan was coming together, and there was a spark of hope. As Kane prepared for the mission ahead, he thought about the men and women who had fought so hard to keep humanity alive. The soldiers who had died, the families who had lost everything, and the generations who had lived in fear. He couldn't let them down. He wouldn't. "General, we're ready," Larkin said, breaking his thoughts. "The team is assembled. We'll follow your lead." Kane nodded, his eyes burning with intensity. "Then let's show the Xarthans what happens when they underestimate humanity." With a final glance at the holographic map, Kane turned to lead the charge. It was time to take the fight to the heart of the Xarthan Empire, and they wouldn't stop until their world was free again. The time had finally come. General Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship, the Vanguard, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic map of the enemy fleet. The Xarthans had no idea what was coming. He could feel the weight of the mission on his shoulders, but he wasn't the kind of leader to show hesitation. The success of this mission could change everything for humanity. Failure wasn't an option. Beside him stood his elite strike team. The team was small, but each member was handpicked for their unique skills. Kane trusted them completely. There was no room for mistakes. First, there was Claire, the experienced pilot who had flown against the Tarthan fleets countless times. She was known for her fearlessness, her ability to take on impossible odds and come out on top. If anyone could get them through the maze of enemy ships and reach the mothership, it was Claire. Then there was Zero, the AI who had been integrated into the Resistance's systems. Zero wasn't just any AI. It was a highly advanced military strategist, able to analyze and predict enemy tactics in real time. It could optimize the team's movements, provide real-time combat support, and calculate the best chances for success. Zero's voice, cold and calculating, echoed through the ship's command center. "General Kane," Zero said, its digital voice smooth and precise. "The Tarthan fleet's defensive systems are formidable. Their cloaking technology, combined with advanced AI tactics, will make this mission highly dangerous. I recommend proceeding with caution." Kane's lips curled into a slight smile. "Caution isn't what's going to win this war, Zero. It's about taking risks, about doing the unexpected. We'll use their overconfidence against them." The mission was clear: infiltrate the enemy mothership, disable their gravitic core, and cripple their entire fleet. But getting there was no easy task. The Tarthans were heavily fortified, their ships protected by a combination of cloaking technology and AI-controlled defenses. Their fleets were scattered across the stars, and every ship was equipped with deadly weapons, automated turrets, and robotic defenders. Claire, standing by the pilot's console, turned to Kane. "Are we ready, General?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with determination. The usual nerve-wracking tension before a mission didn't seem to faze her. Kane gave a sharp nod. "We're ready. Let's move out." The Vanguard slipped out of the Resistance's hidden base, heading toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Kane stood at the command center, watching the crew prepare for the most dangerous mission of their lives. The excitement was palpable, but there was also an air of grim resolve. Everyone knew the risks. Everyone knew the odds were stacked against them. But they also knew they had Kane, and with him, the belief that victory was still possible. The strike team was assigned to their stealth fighter ships. They were smaller, faster, and equipped with cloaking devices that would allow them to approach the enemy fleet undetected. The plan was to slip past the outer defenses, infiltrate the mothership, and sabotage its gravitic core. They had one shot, one chance to make it work. As the team launched into space, the Vanguard faded into the distance, its powerful engines leaving a trail of light as it retreated to a safe distance. It was time for the elite strike team to do what they did best: strike fast and hard. Claire guided her fighter through the vast emptiness of space, her hand steady on the controls. The mission was dangerous, but she had faced worse. The Exarthan fleet loomed ahead, an endless array of massive warships, each one more formidable than the last. But what they didn't know was that the Resistance had developed a countermeasure for their cloaking technology. The cloaking field would be disrupted temporarily, giving them just enough time to slip past the outer defenses. "All systems are go," Claire reported, her eyes narrowing as she took the ship into a series of quick maneuvers. "We're heading into the heart of their fleet. Prepare for action." Kane's voice came through the comms. "Zero, give us the coordinates for the mothership's weak points. We need to know the best way to infiltrate." Zero responded immediately. "Scanning. I am analyzing enemy fleet defenses now. Calculating optimal path. A slight deviation in trajectory is advised to avoid detection by enemy eye turrets." "Understood," Kane replied. "Claire, adjust course based on Zero's suggestions. We don't have much time." Claire executed the maneuver flawlessly. She was the best pilot the Resistance had, and Kane had full confidence in her skills. As they approached the mothership, Kane's heart pounded in his chest. The stakes were higher than ever. They had to get past the cloaking defenses, infiltrate the mothership, and plant the explosives to destroy the gravitic core. Suddenly, The first wave of enemy ships appeared. Sarthan warships with sleek, deadly designs, their dark cloaking fields flickering as they became visible. A few of the ships fired their weapons, and the Vanguard's team had to react fast. "Brace for impact," Claire shouted. Her ship veered hard to the left as enemy fire rained down, narrowly missing them. The resistance fighters opened fire, taking down several smaller ships, but the larger ones were still coming. The action exploded into a wild dogfight. Missiles flew past, narrowly missing, as the fighters dodged incoming fire. Claire's hands danced across the controls, her reflexes lightning fast. Her ship looped and dipped, evading the enemy's attacks, but the danger was everywhere. "Focus on the mission." Kane's voice echoed through the comms. "We can't afford to get distracted. Claire, take us to the mothership. We're almost there." The team followed Kane's orders, staying on course despite the overwhelming odds. As they got closer, Kane's ship was targeted by enemy drones, robotic fighters that swarmed like angry bees. Close quarters combat ensued as Kane and his team fought off the machines, weapons firing in every direction. Sparks flew, and the air was filled with the noise of laser blasts and the sound of metal being torn apart. It was chaotic. Explosions ripped through the space around them, but through it all, Kane remained calm, directing the team with precision. His mind was focused on one thing: completing the mission. Claire and the others followed his lead, their training kicking in as they fought through the overwhelming firepower of the Sarthan fleet. In the midst of the battle, Zero's voice cut through the noise. "General, the cloaking devices have been temporarily disrupted. You have a brief window to infiltrate the mothership. Now's our chance." Kane barked. "Claire, we're going in." The team pushed forward, using the opportunity to breach the enemy fleet's defenses. As they approached the mothership, they could see its massive form looming ahead, dark and imposing. The countdown was ticking. They were about to enter the most dangerous phase of their mission. The strike team had made it past the first hurdle, but they still had a long way to go. They were deep in enemy territory now, and every second counted. The future of humanity depended on the success of this mission. The focus is on the high-intensity action and the team's dangerous mission to infiltrate the Sarthan mothership. The space dogfights, close quarters combat with robots, and Kane's leadership are all designed to keep the audience engaged and invested in the outcome. There's a balance of thrilling action and strategic thinking, with Zero's AI helping to guide the team through dangerous situations. The plan is in motion, and each move brings them closer to their goal. The strike team had successfully infiltrated the enemy mothership, their mission going according to plan. But as they ventured deeper into the heart of the Sarthan warship, the atmosphere shifted. A sense of unease spread among the team members. Kane, usually calm and calculated, could feel it too. Something was off. The walls of the mothership, dark and oppressive, seemed to close in on them as they made their way through narrow, winding corridors. They were close to their objective: the gravitic core, the heart of the Sarthan fleet's power. However, their success was short-lived. In the midst of their mission, a warning blared through their comm system. Kane's eyes widened as he processed the incoming message. "General, we've been locked out of our escape route. Someone sabotaged the systems." Claire's voice came through, tight with alarm. "We're trapped." Kane's mind raced. The mission was too important to let this setback derail them. They had to move forward. But something didn't add up. The sabotage wasn't random. It was planned. Someone had intentionally set them up. But who? That's when Kane received a message from the Resistance flagship Vanguard. It was from Colonel Griffin, a senior officer who had been in charge of coordinating the Resistance's forces. The message was short but chilling. "General, we've been compromised. The enemy has infiltrated our ranks. Proceed with extreme caution." Kane's gut twisted. Betrayal. He had known Griffin for years, trusted him with his life. To think that someone so close to him would betray them was unthinkable, but there was no time to question it further. He needed to act quickly. "Claire, "Get us out of here. Now," Kane ordered. But as they made their way through the corridors, things went from bad to worse. The ship's security systems, once under their control, were now locked down, trapping them inside. Kane's team was surrounded by Xarthan forces, and they were running out of time. The mission was slipping through their fingers. Then came the worst part. Kane's comm system flickered, and he heard a familiar voice, one he never expected to hear again. General Kane. It was Colonel Griffin, but his voice was different now, colder, almost mechanical. "You've been outsmarted. You and your team are finished." Kane froze, his heart sinking as the realization hit him. Griffin wasn't just working with the Xarthans, he was one of them. He had been an alien sympathizer all along, feeding information to the enemy. The Resistance had trusted him, and now that trust had cost them everything. "You traitor," Kane muttered under his breath, the anger boiling in his veins. But there was no time to dwell on the betrayal. They had to survive. Griffin's voice echoed again, this time with a cruel, mocking laugh. "It's over, General. The Xarthan fleet will crush you. Your mission is nothing but a fool's errand." Kane's mind raced. They were running out of time, and now their own people had turned on them. The weight of the situation pressed on him, but he refused to give up. He couldn't. Too many lives depended on him. Suddenly, the sound of blaster fire filled the air. Kane spun around, instinctively raising his weapon. But to his shock, it wasn't the enemy. It was Bonner, one of his most loyal soldiers, holding off a group of approaching Xarthan soldiers. Bonner, a grizzled veteran who had fought alongside Kane for years, was fighting to buy them time. "General, go," Bonner shouted, his voice hoarse with urgency. "I'll hold them off. You finish the mission." Kane's heart clenched. Bonner had always been the heart of their team, the one soldier who would never abandon his comrades. But now, as the Xarthan forces closed in, it was clear that Bonner knew what had to be done. "No, Bonner, we'll fight together. We'll get out of this," Kane protested, his voice filled with desperation. Bonner shook his head, a grim smile crossing his face. "There's no time. This is the only way. You've always said it. Sometimes one life has to be given for the greater good." Kane couldn't respond. He watched in disbelief as Bonner fired off another round, taking down 2 more Xarthan soldiers. But the numbers were overwhelming, and the alien forces were closing in from all sides. "General, go," Bonner shouted again, his voice commanding. "You have to finish this for humanity, for all of us." The words hit Kane like a sledgehammer. Bonner, a man who had stood by him through countless battles, was now giving his life to ensure the mission succeeded. There was no choice. Kane had to keep moving forward. He could feel the tears welling up in his eyes, but he wiped them away. There was no time for grief. There was only the mission. With a final, heart-wrenching glance at his friend, Kane turned and led the team deeper into the mothership, toward the gravitic core. Behind them, Bonner continued to fight, his sacrifice buying them precious seconds. As they reached the heart of the mothership, the gravitic core loomed before them, a massive, glowing sphere of alien energy. They had reached their objective, but Kane's mind was still haunted by the image of Bonner, alone and fighting for a cause that was bigger than any one soldier. The mission was close to completion, but Kane couldn't shake the loss. Bonner had given everything for humanity. The weight of his sacrifice fueled Kane's resolve. This mission wasn't just about defeating the Xarthans. It was about honoring the lives of every soldier who had fought and died for the Resistance. With a steady hand, Kane planted the explosive charges on the gravitic core. "Zero, prepare for detonation," he said, his voice cold but resolute. The AI responded, its voice smooth and emotionless as always. "Charges are set. Detonation sequence activated." But as the countdown began, Kane's mind was with Bonner. The soldier had given his life for the cause, and now it was Kane's turn to finish what they had started. He could feel Bonner's spirit driving him forward, pushing him to victory. As the charges detonated and a gravitic core exploded in a burst of energy, Kane knew that Bonner's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Xarthan fleet was crippled, and humanity had one more chance at survival. Kane and his team stood on the edge of a precipice. The gravitic core had been destroyed, but the Xarthan Empire was far from finished. The alien fleet still loomed over them, massive and imposing. The mothership, the heart of the enemy's power, was still operational. It was a colossus of technology, and its weapons were formidable. But Kane was no stranger to the weight of impossible odds. His team had made it this far, against betrayal, sacrifices, and countless battles. Now they faced their final test. Their mission was clear: to bring down the Xarthan Empire once and for all. The stars outside their ship glowed like distant diamonds as the team prepared for the most dangerous assault of their lives. They had a single shot at this. The enemy fleet was vast, and their defensive systems were impenetrable. The moment they made their move, there would be no turning back. Kane stood before his team, his mind calm despite the chaos around him. "Listen up, team." Kane's voice rang through the comms, steady and commanding. "This is it. We break them now, or we lose everything. We've been through hell to get here, but this is where we end it. 0, start running the final battle plan." 0, the AI that had been invaluable throughout the mission, responded without hesitation. "Battle plan ready, General. Your tactical approach is set for execution." Kane glanced at each member of his elite team. Claire, the experienced pilot who had never once faltered, stood at the helm, her eyes sharp and focused. She would be the one to maneuver them through the heart of the enemy fleet. Beside her, Bonner's memory was fresh in Kane's mind. The soldier's sacrifice had solidified Kane's resolve. This victory would be for Bonner, for every fallen comrade, and for humanity's survival. Kane turned to his team. Everyone knows their roles. This fight is not just about strength. It's about timing, precision, and working as one. We distract, we strike, and we don't stop until the mothership is nothing but debris. As Kane finished, Claire nodded, her hands steady on the controls. "Ready when you are, General." The countdown began. With a flick of a switch, the final assault began. The team's ship, small but deadly, launched into space, racing toward the heart of the Xarthan fleet. It wasn't long before they were surrounded by the enormous warships of the enemy, their sleek, dark forms blocking out the stars. The tension in the air was palpable. Kane's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He had fought in countless battles, faced armies, and watched friends die. But this felt different. This was the moment that would define the future of humanity. The Xarthan ships began to fire, massive energy blasts lighting up the space around them. But Kane had prepared for this. With Zero's help, the ship's stealth systems activated, cloaking them in near invisibility. They were like ghosts in the dark. Kane had always known the power of deception, and it was time to use it to their advantage. "Claire, take us in," Kane ordered. His voice was calm, but the weight of what they were about to do was not lost on him. They were heading straight for the heart of the Xarthan fleet, and the mothership's defenses were as deadly as ever. Every move counted. There was no room for error. The ship darted and weaved through the massive Xarthan warships, narrowly avoiding blasts as they skimmed across the edges of the enemy's defenses. Claire's hands flew across the controls with precision, her experience guiding them through the chaos of space combat. The cloaking device worked perfectly, masking their movements as they cut through the enemy fleet like a knife through butter. "Now," Kane barked, "deploy the decoys." At his command, small drones launched from their ship, moving rapidly toward the enemy's main fleet. These drones were designed to distract the Xarthan ships, sending out false signals, creating the illusion of a larger strike force. As the decoys moved into position, the Xarthan ships, confused by the sudden influx of targets, fired wildly, their focus shifting. "Time for Phase 2, Kane said, his voice unwavering. The plan was in motion. With the enemy's attention temporarily diverted, Kane signaled for the next phase of the assault. Zero, having analyzed the fleet's patterns, identified the weak spots in the mothership's defenses. Now, it was time to strike. "Claire, full throttle. We're going in," Kane ordered. Claire punched the controls, sending their ship rocketing toward the mothership. It was a suicide mission, no one could deny that, but Kane knew this was the only way. Their only hope lay in destroying the mothership from the inside. There was no turning back now. As they approached, the Xarthan defenses began to tighten. Massive energy cannons locked onto their ship, and Kane's heart skipped a beat as a volley of fire hurtled toward them. The ship shook violently as Claire dodged, but the Xarthans were relentless. Their firepower was overwhelming. "Zero, we need a way through," Kane shouted. "Engaging evasive tactics," Zero replied. The eye's calculations were running at full speed, directing Claire's every move. The ship veered to the side, narrowly avoiding another barrage of blasts. Kane's pulse raced, the proximity of the enemy's weapons making the situation even more intense. But Kane remained calm. They had trained for this moment. They had been prepared for every possible outcome. With one last burst of speed, their ship shot forward, closing the distance between them and the mothership. Now they were in range. Kane activated the primary weapon systems, launching a powerful wave of energy blasts directly at the mothership's main defenses. The shields surrounding the mothership began to flicker as the energy struck, each blast chipping away at its protective barrier. "Claire, hit the main reactor," Kane ordered. Claire didn't hesitate. With a quick adjustment, she directed the ship's weapons at the mothership's core, where the gravitic core had been located. The energy blasts hit their target, and the mothership's hull began to tremble. The sound of explosions rippled through space as Kane's strategy took effect. But just as they thought they were in the clear, the Tarthan mothership retaliated. Its weapons powered up once more, and a final blast shot toward their ship, faster than anything they had faced before. The ship rocked violently, and alarms blared. The hull of their ship groaned as the blast made contact. Kane's vision blurred for a moment, and for a split second, he thought they might not make it. But then Claire's voice came through, strong and steady. "We're still here, General, and we're finishing this." With one final push, the ship's weapon systems fired again. And this time, the blast was enough. The Tarthan mothership exploded in a massive burst of light, the shockwave reverberating through space. Kane's team had done it. The heart of the Xarthan fleet was no more. As the debris from the mothership scattered in all directions, the remaining Xarthan ships began to retreat. Their entire command structure had been destroyed. Kane stood in the cockpit, his heart pounding in his chest. It was over. The victory was bittersweet. They had won, but at what cost? Bonner's sacrifice still weighed heavily on Kane's mind. Yet, in the destruction of the Xarthan Empire, he saw a glimmer of hope. Humanity had survived. And thanks to the bravery of his team, they had a future. The final echoes of battle still reverberated in space. The Xarthan Empire, once a powerful force that had threatened humanity's very existence, was on the verge of collapse. The destruction of their mothership and the decimation of their fleet had left the alien empire reeling, its once unshakable hold over the galaxy now broken. Kane's eyes narrowed as he stared out into the void of space, the stars glittering before him like silent witnesses to the victory humanity had won. Kane knew the war was not over yet. There were still factions of the Xarthan Empire that could pose a threat, and the galaxy was still full of uncertainty. But what had happened in the last few days had proven something undeniable. Humans were not to be underestimated. They had fought for their survival, using everything they had learned, every sacrifice, every ounce of strength. And now, they stood victorious. As the final remnants of the Xarthan fleet retreated into the darkness, Kane's mind turned to the ultimate confrontation, the moment when the leader of the Xarthan Empire would be forced to face the consequences of their defeat. The leader, once untouchable, had been cornered, with no way to escape or continue the fight. Kane's ship approached the alien flagship, now crippled and drifting in the void. The bridge of the ship was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems and the occasional beep from Zero, the AI. Claire, as always, was at the helm, her face set in determination, as she guided them closer to the flagship. "They've surrendered, Kane." Zero's voice echoed through the comms. "The leader of the Xarthan Empire is willing to negotiate. They have no choice." Kane nodded. The alien empire had underestimated humanity from the very beginning, but now they had learned the hard way. The truth was clear. Humanity, with all its imperfections and flaws, possessed a power that no one could have predicted. Kane had seen it in the hearts of his soldiers, in the courage of every human who had fought against the Xarthans, and in the willingness of his team to sacrifice everything for the greater good. This was the moment when the Xarthans would truly understand the strength of humanity. Kane was ready to face the leader of the Empire and deliver his terms. He had been through too much, too many losses, too many sacrifices, not to make this count. As the ship docked with the Xarthan flagship, Kane and his team were escorted into the heart of the enemy's command center. The alien leader, a towering figure with sleek, dark armor, stood before them. His eyes, glowing with a strange, unsettling light, met Kane's gaze with an air of defiance. "You may have won the battle," the leader said, his voice cold and calculating. "But this war is far from over. The Xarthan Empire will rise again. Your victory means nothing." Kane's face remained stoic. He had heard this kind of talk before, empty threats, arrogant declarations, but there was no room for negotiation here. The time for talking was over. The time for action had come. "We've reached the end of this war," Kane replied, his voice steady, but filled with an intensity that could not be ignored. "Your empire is broken, and your fleet is scattered. You have no choice but to surrender." The Xarthan leader sneered. "Surrender? You think you've won. You've merely delayed the inevitable. The Xarthans are eternal." Kane took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. "I've given you a choice," he said, his voice cold and unwavering. "You can either leave the human colonies alone, or you can face the consequences. You've already lost. If you choose to interfere with us again, we'll make sure you never recover from it." The alien leader studied Kane for a long moment, clearly calculating his options. He was a ruler, a conqueror, and he had never been forced into a position like this. His empire had always crushed those who dared to stand in its way. But now, faced with the absolute defeat of his forces and the undeniable power of humanity, he realized there was no escaping the consequences. "Your terms," the leader began, his voice filled with reluctant acceptance. "I will honor them, for now. But know this, the Xarthan Empire will never forget this humiliation." Kane stepped forward, his voice hardening. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't about humiliation. It's about survival. And you've learned it the hard way." As the alien leader stepped back, Kane's team remained tense, ready for any sign of betrayal. But the leader did nothing further. The deal was done. Kane turned to his team, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. He had won the war, but at what cost? Bonner's sacrifice still weighed on him, and the memories of those they had lost in the battle haunted him. But for every life lost, another would be saved. Humanity had earned its right to exist. Turning back to the view of Earth through the bridge's viewport, Kane felt a sense of pride mixed with a quiet sadness. Earth, their home, was now free from the threat of annihilation. But the war had changed everything. Humanity had been tested, and they had passed, against all odds. The Xarthans had learned that humans were not just survivors, but fighters, innovators, and protectors. As the ships in the fleet began to withdraw, returning to their home planet, Kane allowed himself a moment of reflection. The battle was won, but the true work had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and new challenges would arise. Humanity's future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the human spirit could not be broken. "This is only the beginning," Kane thought to himself as he looked out at the stars. "Humanity's future is brighter than ever, and no matter what comes next, we'll face it together." With a final look at the empty space where the enemy fleet had once stood, Kane gave the command to return home. The war was over, but humanity's journey had only just begun. In Part 6, The End of the War, we see the final culmination of the resistance against the Xarthan Empire. With Kane's unwavering resolve and leadership, the human forces not only defeat the alien empire, but also redefine the future of humanity in the galaxy. The victory comes at a great emotional cost, but it is a hard-earned one that signifies humanity's strength, resilience, and unyielding will to survive. The surrender of the Xarthan Empire's leader brings a moment of reflection, and the closing lines serve as a powerful reminder that even in victory, humanity faces an uncertain future. The ending is victorious, yet bittersweet, and it leaves the audience with a sense of triumph tempered by the knowledge that there will always be new challenges ahead. This final chapter wraps up the story on an emotional and cinematic note, ensuring that the audience feels the weight of the journey, the sacrifices made, and the significance of what has been achieved. The battle may have ended, but the war for humanity's future is just beginning.